Yeah, okay, the Gentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation, knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Gentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest. We have Nate Reed. He is the city manager of Perry, Oklahoma, but he's more than that. He is a long-term community advocate. He is an innovator using tools like AI to better suit and serve the people in his community. And we have so much in common in our background that I'll get into a little bit later. But before we jump into that, Nate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Jonathan. I appreciate you having me out. It was fun talking to you the other day, getting to know you a little bit, and I'm excited to spend some time with you today.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, and I'm excited for our viewers. And how we like to start is we like to jump right into it. So what's the secret sauce? What makes Perry, Oklahoma the best place to live in the United States?
You know, when we came out here to visit, my wife and I, the first thing that really caught our eye was the people, just how warm and open everybody was. So we really loved that about it. But honestly, like the town itself is really neat too, in terms of it has a downtown square that is like your picturesque square that you would see like in a Hallmark movie. And that's really a source of pride in the community. So I'd say those two things between the people and kind of the history is just fantastic in those ways.
I love that. Wherever there's good people, you can always find a home. And I'm big on history, and I think that might be the best segue into this. So talk me through it. What was your childhood like? Did you grow up knowing that you always wanted to be a city manager? What's your history, Nate?
Yeah, you know, growing up, childhood was fantastic. I have two loving, great parents, two brothers who we just fought all the time growing up, and now we're awesome friends, you know, which I think is pretty common for brothers. But no, I had no idea I wanted to be a city manager. In fact, I had never even heard of a city manager. You know, I think growing up, it's pretty common for people to hear about mayors and to hear about police chiefs and fire chiefs, and that's kind of what you think of as a kid when you think of municipalities. You know, you think of those three figures, and those are the jobs available as a city worker. You know, that's what you think anyway. So yeah, I had no idea I wanted to be a city manager.
Now, I know you spent most of your life in Utah. What was the impetus for moving? What were your college years like? I know you spent that in Utah as well, and I know you did you did a short time in finance like myself. I'd love to kind of hear even how that maybe is influencing what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Utah. We moved out for this job specifically. I spent some time in Spanish Fork City in Utah. Loved it there. It's a city of 50,000, and I think they have the best administration in the state. They're fantastic, and was able to be mentored by the city manager and the assistant city manager there, to the point where I felt like I was fulfilling my job role and didn't have a whole lot more to offer. I felt like we'd kind of arrived at a space where obviously there's always more to do, but we were in a good spot. And I really wanted to take what I'd learned from those two mentors and take it out to smaller communities who didn't have that, you know? And so we looked in small towns in Texas and Oklahoma and North Carolina, trying to get, you know, somewhere a little bit warmer than Utah. And landed on Perry and came out, you know, thinking they didn't even post a salary range. So I was like, I don't know if they'll be able to, you know, pay me what I need to move my family out there. And we came and loved it. And we were able to come up with a good agreement, and we've enjoyed it ever since. So that's kind of the move. In terms of the second part of your question, which was college and finance and kind of that background. You know, I talked a little bit about this when you and I met the other day, but when I was 19, I served a mission for my church, spent 2 years in West Africa, really learned to love people a lot during that experience, and got home from that mission and went to college because that's kind of what you did, in the middle class families. That's kind of what they pushed, at least for me growing up. And so I started college at Utah Valley University, had no idea what I wanted to do, which I think is, at least was common then. I don't know. It seems like kids these days have more of an idea what they want to do, at least those I talk to. But I had no idea. So I started taking a bunch of classes. I looked at, well, maybe I want to do geology, and then maybe I'll do computer science. Looked at those kind of things and really kind of changed directions a lot. Ended up 2/3 through my college career and still not knowing, what I wanted to do, in terms of I had enough credits that I'd been there for, 3.5 years. I'm like, what am I doing? So I got really serious and started to write down careers, take tests, like personality tests and things like that. Went and job shadowed an attorney. I met with an engineer and talked about his work. And every time I would meet with these people, I would leave the experience just feeling discouraged and thinking, man, I thought I was interested in that. I'm not. It's not a fit for me. While I was serving my mission, I had someone move into my neighborhood who was a city manager. And so I didn't know him because I was out of the country when he moved in, but my parents did. They were next door neighbors. And this man was talking to my parents one day in passing and just said, I know Nate's struggling to kind of figure out what he wants to do. Why don't you have him come out and job shadow me? And that was a life-changing moment because I ended up going and doing that and just had a completely different experience than I'd had before, where I loved every minute with him. And I felt like, man, this guy gets to work with people. He gets to work with numbers. He gets to make impactful decisions that actually help his community. And I loved it, left it knowing I wanted to be a city manager. That led to an internship, which just solidified what I wanted to do. Kind of towards the end of that, I was finishing up college when that was happening and had decided to study finance just to get through as quick as I could because I'd kind of leaned towards those classes. And you mentioned your background in finance. You managed a hedge fund, I think, that's a big deal, working on a hedge fund. And you were for Morgan Stanley?
JP Morgan.
JP Morgan. Yeah. Okay. I was, and I went with Goldman Sachs just after graduating. I was just with them for 9 months or so. And that really solidified, I love the numbers, but I was at a computer all day. Didn't get to work with people. And I'm like, oh, I missed that. So it was kind of the final straw that, okay, this is what I want to do. Talking to a city manager one day, he said, Nate, if you want to be one, you have to go to grad school, get your MPA, and BYU is the best place in the state to do that. And that led me to BYU, got my grad degree, and just haven't looked back. It's been so fantastic.
So much to unpack there. First, you never know what is going to be, like you said, that impetus that literally kicks you in a whole nother direction and re-energizes your life in a lot of ways, with career being so much of an important part of many people's lives. And your parents, I'm sure they had conversations with your neighbor, and that was what kind of kicked it. So they were always thinking about your best interest, which is awesome. And I actually hear that so much. I'm thinking of two different city managers that I've spoken to, one down in Atlanta, and then one's actually an economic development or the development director in Powder Springs. And they both had an penchant for like public policy. I'm going to go to DC, and then they meet and I do a job shadow with the city manager, and like, whoa, no, I actually want to do the work. I don't necessarily want to like talk about the work, theorize, or being like a think tank or something like that. I want to do the work, and city managers are truly doing the work. And that's spectacular. And it's so interesting to see how actually seeing what the job is in certain cases for you was a negative. But in the case of the city manager, that spark, that fire was engendered in you. So that is incredible. Now, for our younger viewers who may have not had the opportunity to job shadow a city manager, what is a city manager in your words?
Yeah, city manager in my mind is a public servant. It's if you really like serving people and making a difference in your community, a city manager is the best career path for that, because you get to interact with all the different departments. So you're not just stuck in a narrow scope of what you can do, and help make decisions that impact every department and thus every aspect of the community. When it comes to policing, you get to talk with the police chief and make decisions on budget, decisions on what tools they use, decisions on what internal policies they have. I was talking with my police chief the other day, and we were discussing hey, when there's a power outage in town, they have all these alarms going off, right? Because the alarm went off, it comes back on, and thus it rings. And we also had stoplights out. And so we were discussing, well, what's the priority? Do you send your police officers to the stoplight and make sure that people aren't flying through those and, getting in wrecks, or do you send them to these alarm sites? And so you get to make those types of decisions at every level. And it's the work you do on a daily basis, you see reflected in every aspect of the community. And I don't think there's another job like that in the world.
It's incredible. And we've seen it so much recently how important city management is, and lives are at stake. So I definitely tip my hat to you. I envy you, but I don't envy you. I envy you in the sense you have an incredible job, but I definitely know it is not easy. While we're still kind of talking to our younger viewers, what's some advice you may give them? Obviously, well, I guess maybe one day, but nobody's coming out of college and going straight to become a city manager. They usually are working their way up. Any advice for maybe somebody young in college or recent grad that's thinking of creating a career in public service? What would you kind of say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different paths you can take, right? As a career in public service, city management isn't the only way you can make an impact. Becoming a director at any level in public service is a fantastic way to serve your community, but it's more narrow in scope, obviously. So if you like generalization, city management is a great path. If you want more of a niche where you're focused on public safety or you're focused on streets or infrastructure, there's different paths you can take and still work for a city and be a public servant. If you want the generalization and want to be a city manager, absolutely the fastest way to do it is get a master's degree in public administration and get an internship. There's tons of internships all over the country offered for especially grad students, but even those with a bachelor. I have an intern right now who's an OSU student studying political science, and we posted the job and nobody applied. We're like, what the heck? Like, this is a great opportunity. Nobody applied. I think that it's like we were talking about earlier, Jonathan, that people just don't know what a city manager does. And so they see city management intern and they're like, well, I don't know what that is. So they kind of skip it. But I reached out to her directly and was like, hey, we met this one time. This is the job. Are you interested? And I think she's had a really good experience. I know my internships were fantastic experiences, but that gives you an opportunity to see the day to day, and interact and see, is this something I want to do? Because like you said, there's all these amazing aspects to it, but there's definitely some downsides. You have to have a thick skin to be able to deal with some of the complaints and things. And every job's like that. Every job has its pros and cons. So
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing from you is get that MPA, so go to grad school and jump on opportunities, jump on internships to really see what the job entails. And while we're on the job itself, what are the strategic goals of Perry and how are those created? Have you guys recently gone through a comprehensive plan or plan on doing a strategic plan pretty soon?
yeah, great question. I just had one other thought on your previous question that
Let's
what you said.
jump. Let's jump.
Reaching out to city managers, I've met a lot of city managers and almost every single one of them is eager to help. That's why they get in the career path, right? And so if you have a question, like you think you may be interested in city management, reach out to a city manager or reach out to two or three, and you'll probably get two or three responses because they really want to help people. And I'm super eager. So if any one of your viewers has any kind of a question, I'd be more than happy to talk to them about city management and answer their questions. But I think all city managers are like that. All the ones I've met anyway are just really great boosters, I would call them. So in terms of your second question, though, strategic plan, yes. So when I joined the city of Perry a year and a half ago, the council had already taken some initiative and started to build a strategic plan. And then through that process, they stopped and they said, okay, we have enough of a base. Let's hire someone and let them be involved in that process to build the rest. So the council really did it right. And I'm really thankful they did because that strategic plan guides my decisions every day. Ours has 5 aspects. It focuses on quality of life, it focuses on infrastructure and communication to the residents, and then it focuses on housing, which is a really big deal right now. And then it also focuses on tax base and increasing our tax base, getting money from other sources other than just water and electric rates. So
No, I love that they had the foresight to know we want to have a basis and we want to be able to help guide and shape some of this decision making of the city manager. But we're bringing in somebody that's going to be well equipped to do this job, and we want them to have some input on that throughout the process. So I definitely tip my hat to them. As far as the priorities, are there any initiatives along those priorities that you're particularly excited about or think can add some value to Perry?
Man, yeah, so many things that I'm excited about with it. The communication one is the one that comes to mind first because that's just a tough one to tackle. I think if you were to ask most cities, the staff would say, "Oh yeah, we do a really good job at communicating." And I think if you ask most residents of any city, they would say the city does a terrible job at communicating. And so there's kind of that gap that needs to be filled. And for us, that gap has been filled, not totally. There's obviously always work to do, but one way that we've helped kind of fill it is through a monthly newsletter. And so we do this monthly newsletter where we have a staff member who just does a fantastic job at talking to the departments and talking to me and talking about current projects and concerns in the community and exciting things and history from, a long time ago, and just shares all of that in a 3 to 5 page monthly newsletter that goes out with the utility bills and then is posted on our Facebook. And we've just got so many compliments, Jonathan, about that newsletter. People are like, yeah, she's doing an awesome job and it's so informative, and they just really enjoy reading it. So I think from the communication perspective, that is something that's really been exciting to see. The housing, we have this awesome housing project that's supposed to be coming the start of 2026. That'll be duplexes and triplexes, because that's something that's almost totally missing in the community of Perry. And so really excited for that and the affordability on the housing side that it'll provide. And then we have some awesome economic development projects going on for the tax base stuff, where we have a distribution center coming, and they're supposed to be fully built in the next 11 months, bring 100 new jobs. I'm talking with a data center finance company right now who wants to build a data center in Perry, and just some other exciting projects like that really, as I think about like the motivation, what keeps me going day to day, I was thinking about that question this morning. And I think it's not one thing, it's, for me, having the job that I have, I look each day and there's at least one thing every day that I'm super excited about, one meeting, or one ordinance that I get to adjust, or, something every day that gives me kind of motivation and helps me give my best effort.
Yeah, no, I can feel the excitement, and that's what you want out of a leader of your city. Is somebody that is excited to do the job. You're not ignorant to the fact that there are some tough parts. When you were sharing to our young viewers, you got to have thick skin. You have to be able to make tough decisions. But I can feel and hear your excitement to actually serve the community. And on the community piece, how do you think Perry's doing on making the city cradle to grave? So think young family, or no, just come out of college or come out of high school and having a trade, to having a young family, to having a larger family, to maybe retiring, kids out of the house, and maybe moving out of that house to age in place. How do you guys think you're doing at this point? And if not where you want to be, what are some of the things, I heard housing initiatives that you're doing to create that cradle to grave community?
Yeah, it's a really tough question because everybody has different needs, and it kind of goes into a philosophy question, which is what city or what part does a city play, right, in meeting those needs? Some would say, they shouldn't play any part. Others would say they should do everything, and I tend to fall kind of in between, where cities should incentivize businesses and developments that will lead to a better quality of life for their residents and fill gaps that either can't be filled by the private sector because they don't make financial sense, or aren't being filled by the private sector because Perry's a small town, right? And so one thing that comes to mind is we've been meeting with a developer to bring in just various businesses that don't naturally show an interest in Perry because of its population size. And these can be businesses as simple as, a Jimmy John's for a sandwich shop, or they can be housing complexes or a car wash. Right now we only have a manual car wash in Perry, and it's like, we want one of those automatic car washes because we have data that shows people are driving to different cities from Perry to get their car washed. And it's like, we want to provide that here. And so bringing in those businesses and incentivizing them in ways that make financial sense for both the city and the developer finding those win-wins is something that I love about my job and something that we're trying to do. And I think that every city manager is trying to do. It's about finding those contacts, because I think if you can find somebody who's willing to talk, you can come up with a solution that works for both of you.
Yeah, the win-win is, I don't want to say it's a lost art right now. I want to say it's something that we sometimes gloss over when we talked about our backgrounds in finance. And sometimes those negotiations, you can feel people just trying to win. But if you can make it beneficial for both parties involved, I think that's when you can make long-term change. And when you start to think of Perry's tool belt or chest of tools, what are some of the things that you use to influence or incentivize development or industry to come to Perry?
Mhm. So we're really lucky here. Ed Malzahn, who started Ditch Witch and then sold Ditch Witch to Toro for something like $700 million, loved the city of Perry. He loved the YMCA, and he loved the school district here in Perry. And so he started this trust, and they give grants to those three entities every year to help with initiatives, which is super helpful, right? It's super helpful to be able to offer developers more money than we could by ourselves because of this Malzahn trust. But at the end of the day, there are some things that we do without that trust, and they follow the same principles. They follow the principles of giving what you have and sacrificing maybe benefits now for future benefits. And what I mean by that is what we don't have a lot of in Perry, or haven't had a lot of until more recently, has been money. We recently did a rate increase, a massive rate increase, to try to get some more funds, because our whole capital improvement fund across all departments was $300,000 for the year. So it's like, how do you do water projects and buy vehicles and streets projects with $300,000? And the answer is you don't. You can't do any of that. And so we're really falling behind. And so we haven't had money traditionally to give to developers. But what we did have is land. The city owns a ton of land, just because over the years, in a small town in rural Oklahoma, land has been cheap. And so we've acquired it. And so what we've been doing recently is giving land or offering land to developers at a discounted or free rate, and saying, hey, with certain stipulations, certain agreements, we'll give you this parcel if you do X, Y, and Z in this amount of time. And that's worked pretty well for us. And then the icing on the cake is we've actually sacrificed things that would benefit us now, like the increased electricity that they would, we'd be providing for them, we'd be selling to them. And we've taken those revenues and said, hey, we'll forego those for a certain amount of time, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 5 years, and give you, $1,000 back for each one of those years. So I'll give you $5,000 or $4,000 or $10,000, whatever that number is, depending on the situation, if you finish your project and get a certificate of occupancy. And so really those are the two big things that we're using right now, are the land and the financial incentive, kind of as a cherry on top.
I think that's a great way to think of it, and a luxury in a lot of different ways. Having the land, like I was just talking to economic development director in Leadville, Colorado. They have jobs galore, but they just don't have land. Harborough, North Carolina, they have UNC, great hospital system, but no land.
Yeah.
Cedar City, Texas, again, booming city, no land. So that is something that is a huge benefit. And then I also want to point out, I tip my hat to you. A lot of people can kind of think of municipal leaders as people that are thinking about the future or thinking about the now, rather than sometimes the future. I tip my hat to your council, your mayor potentially, and whoever is helping make that decision for you guys to raise rates in the near term, because long term things like capital improvement need to be taken care of. I mean, we've seen it across the nation. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Kick the can, kick the can, kick the can until that can gets too heavy and the streets are literally falling apart. But I tip my hat to all of Perry for focusing on that in the near term. I know, I'm sure we were talking about the communication piece. I'm sure that was not an easy communication to the community members, but
Oh yeah, it was super tough. And while you bring that up, it's an interesting kind of conversation because the way we did it was suggested by the council and it worked out really well. So we raised water and sewer rates 70%. And so it was a massive,
Wow.
right? And we went in to the community, we held a town hall meeting and we said, listen, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. And there were 50 to 100 people there and they just, all rebelled. And our mayor did just such a good job at just hearing them out, listening to them. And through a series of town hall meetings and meetings with kind of small groups of council members, we came up with this plan because we knew we needed the 70%. And we convinced the residents by showing them data that was the case. And it was so cool to see them, some of them, really a good portion, kind of look at the data that we were presenting and say, this is going to be hard. We get why it needs to happen though. And through those meetings, we ended up coming up with a plan of, well, we'll keep the 70% raise, but we'll do it over 3 years. And it was a really good, I think, compromise and solution that came out of staff meeting with electeds and then all of us meeting with the community. So it was local government in action like I've never seen. And I have to say, Jonathan, I don't ever want to do that again. That it was brutal, but the result was really satisfying.
Sure. And I think it goes to show that the community, given the right information, can be very reasonable. And I, as a community member myself, always say, like, make it make sense. If you can justify and show me why something needs to be that way, and then I can internalize it, analyze it, and it makes sense to me, then we can move forward, even if it is tough, even if it feels like pulling teeth. But the fact that you guys were transparent and open and listened, I think people want to be heard at the end of the day too, but they can appreciate sometimes the tough decisions will need to be made. So again, I truly tip my hat to you guys. Now, I know we've talked about a lot of positives, which as we should, because you guys are doing well. But is there any challenge or a barrier or anything that if you could just snap your fingers and change, it would make Perry a better place, or maybe the local government organization run better?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, without thinking about this for weeks, which I would have to do if I actually had that power, right? I think the thing that comes to mind for me is just housing costs. It seems like that is at the foundation of a lot of our issues right now as a nation, where it's, businesses are having a hard time and having to raise prices and people are having to pay more for everything and housing costs are up and housing costs are that's your major monthly expense, right? And so that's really controlling kind of everything else. And I know there are things controlling that, we need to get to the root of the issue. But, if you gave me the power just to snap and change housing costs and make them more reasonable for people, I think that would have just a massive impact in Perry and across the nation.
Definitely, the affordable housing is something that always comes up when I ask that question. Right now, though, what are kind of the makeup of housing in Perry? It sounds like you guys maybe were missing some duplexes, triplexes. What is kind of the makeup right now?
Yeah, so it's mostly single family. We really don't have a whole lot of rentals in Perry. In fact, when my wife and I were looking at moving out here, we were like, well, let's rent for a year and figure out kind of what part of town we'd like to live in. There was one rental online, one. And I called them and they're like, oh no, wait, sorry, we already gave it away. Somebody called yesterday, and it's a small town, but one rental like posted was I'd never seen something like that before. And so we're missing rentals right now in a very real way. They get snatched up very quickly when they're posted. But honestly, just multifamily housing is a big thing. We have a lot of single family and obviously need more of that, but we also need the apartment complexes and the duplexes and the triplexes. And the apartments are hard because they require, fire suppression and things like that. But developers are looking and saying, hey, we can do these duplexes and triplexes without adding that extra cost of fire suppression. And therefore, that's kind of what they're focusing on for this project that we're going to do. And I think that's the kind of creativity they need, to meet needs under the boundaries or criteria that they have to live with.
Yeah, that one is always a tough one. Like some of the places that I spoke of last time, I was talking about kind of the lack of land. They're trying to figure out that issue without the ability to just kind of spread out, and they're doing things like ADUs, things like that. The great thing is, it sounds like you guys do have the land, which is a huge help. In that same vein, one of your strategic priorities was quality of life. And that is, I've been saying recently, I hear quality of life so much from city managers, economic developers, and mayors. And I believe around 10, 15 years ago, you didn't really hear it as much. What does quality of life mean to Perry? And what are the things you guys are kind of focusing on to make that quality of life as high as possible?
It's interesting you say that, Jonathan, because I think it's kind of a catch-all, right? That the community leaders are using to describe the things that make their community better, but can't be put into a category. For us, one thing that council's pushing really heavily right now for me is more events. Get a couple of more events every year in order to provide more things for families to do in Perry. And so I think that's kind of how we're going about it in Perry. And there's a ton of other stuff that we love to do and we're trying to do, but are a little bit harder. Providing businesses, that families can go to, like a bowling alley or something, would be a quality of life piece. Our downtown square, we're doing renovations on that square to make it easier for people to gather, for bands to play, just to make it more attractive for events that we do have down there. And that's a quality of life piece. So really, a lot of what cities do day to day is quality of life, right? Like you look at all the services that we provide that the private industry won't provide because they don't make financial sense. Police officers, right? Making crime rates go down. That's quality of life piece. Firemen and EMS, making sure you're safe in your homes. And if you have an injury, you can be addressed very quickly. That's a quality of life piece. Parks, having parks to go to where you can play with your family, your friends, quality of life, as is library, library services. Well, I want, books to read to entertain me or to learn things. That's increasing quality of life. So at its core, cities are providing quality of life with a lot of their services. And then there's the basic needs services like the water and the sewer and the electric, right? Which contribute to quality of life, but you could argue, well, yeah, those are, fundamental needs, which cities do as well, right?
Definitely. And I think I love the way you broke it down, that catch-all that adds to your experience, but may not make the financial sense for the private market. So you guys take care of it. I think that's a nice way to put it for people to understand. Now, let's say we're fast forward in 20 years from now, Nate. What are they saying about Perry? What's the legacy of Nate Reed? So two different questions.
The Perry, what they're saying about Perry, I think is they're going to be astounded at how fast things grew. They're going to look and say, holy cow, like all of a sudden, all this stuff started happening. And in a way, that's kind of my legacy too. But in a more deep reflection approach, it's really, I think there's a scripture where Paul's talking and he says something like Apollos planted, someone else watered, and then, but God gave the increase, right? And so just kind of talking about how different people over time did things that led to results. And I'm really lucky because I feel like I'm coming into Perry at a time where I'm seeing fruit on a tree that's almost ready to pick, right? And I just have to say, oh yeah, we just need to do like these small things. And then that's ready to harvest, and I just feel really lucky in that way. But I think people are going to look back and they'll probably attribute a lot of that to the council. And I think that's deserved. There's been a lot of council members on there for a long time that have done just awesome things. And then there's new council members who are really honing in and focusing on what needs to happen to pick that fruit. But I think people will look back and I think hopefully they'll say, Nate contributed to that. And I hope that that's kind of my legacy here in Perry. So
I love that. And I think it's beautiful to hear you explain that you walked into a situation that was bubbling, maybe under the ground bubbling, but it was getting there. And then now you're just trying to make sure that you're able to bring it to fruition. And you gave kudos to your council, and that kind of just shows the relationship that you guys have. All the time. That's not the case that I hear that. So now it's great to hear that you have that great relationship. Now, as we're ending up, is there any last words that you maybe have to our viewers, generally to young viewers, or to anybody?
That's something I should have thought about before.
No pressure, no
Well,
pressure.
what's your final, if you only had 5 seconds to live, like, what are you going to tell people? I don't know. I think if you're watching this podcast, I think it's because you care. I think it's because you care deeply about your community or you're looking for a way to contribute meaningfully. And so I would just say, keep up keep up the great work. This world needs people who care. And Jonathan, I can tell talking to you that you care. And I'm so grateful for people like you and for the viewers who are willing to spend their time learning and looking at these issues and trying to find ways to solve these issues to make the world better, and make people happier, make families happier, and ultimately lead to just a better place to live and work.
Appreciate that. And I think you did great. I don't think you needed to think it through. That was some good improv. Yeah, because I mean that's what it comes down to. Just caring. And I agree. Like the viewers, especially those that watch these all the way through, they care. And then they're trying to understand how they can either make a change in their community, how they can go to a community and make a change, or just how they can create a great career that's meaningful work and that they're just proud of. And that brings peace to them and their family.
Yeah.
So that care for others and for your community, I definitely want to echo that. Thank you for your kind words. And to our viewers, I care about you and I appreciate you. And I'd like to say thank you. And this is the Jentry Podcast. And again, we have Nate Reed, the city manager of Perry, Oklahoma. And this has been an incredible episode. And I just want to say thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks, Jonathan.